Okay, hello and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Smith, and am or was a first Q in Ishinru Karate and Japanese Jiu Jitsu back 26 years ago before I had my strokes and got terribly sick. Anyway, and so even though I don't look the part because of type 2 diabetes and 4 strokes, I used to be a pretty badass fighter in karate and Japanese Jiu Jitsu. And I later, 16 years after the fact and out of practice, had joined a Gracie gym, which is about 3.5, 4 miles down the road from where I live. And in spite of all the nonsense of people claiming that I'm a liar and this, that, and the other, I actually repeatedly tapped out two professional fighters. I tapped one of them out 3 out of 4 rolls, and he had 20 something professional wins. I know it was more than 20 because he told me himself. I don't remember the exact number, but he had 20 something professional MMA wins, and I tapped him out 3 out of the first 4 rolls that I did against him, twice using the front wrist lock and once using the disarmer. All right. And the other guy I tapped out using what's essentially stomach nerve 9 on the side of his neck and fish hooking, believe it or not. And he was supposedly a 3rd degree Gracie black belt and a pro fighter. So don't tell me that this stuff doesn't work. Matter of fact, fish hooking and stomach nerve 9 are both directly banned in MMA. But Ramsey Dewey is saying that joint locks are not banned in MMA. Then why don't they ever get used? Are the fighters incompetent, or is there some other reason? Ramsey Dewey says it's because of the gloves and the tape and the adrenaline, and so does the bot on Google. And I say that's BS because we used to spar in gloves in the karate class, and I repeatedly tapped out second degree black belts, one of whom was a Marine Corps veteran from the early 1990s, uh, when they still went through the crucible and hazing and stuff as part of Marine Corps training. And he was a second degree black belt in the same style of martial arts I trained in, which was Ishinru Karate and Japanese Jiu Jitsu, and a 235-pound heavyweight. And I could tap him out. And in fact, I could actually beat 2 second-degree black belts at the time allied against me in a true handicap match. The only reason I kept failing the black belt test is because I sucked at kata memorization and couldn't memorize the very last kata in the style. So I kept failing the black belt test. It wasn't that I couldn't fight, and it wasn't that they couldn't fight either. I just became even twice the badass they were. But I could tap out a heavyweight, and I was only 185 pounds at the time, and he was 235 solid muscle. And he was an 8-year veteran of the Marine Corps and an 8-year veteran police officer at the time. I want to say that makes him about he was in his mid 30s, so I'd say about 35 or 36 years old. But I guess that made him. And of course, I was 20 years old, so he was maybe a couple years past his absolute prime, whereas I was in my prime. But still, I could tap him out, and I've been on the receiving end of joint locks. When Sensei put a joint lock on you, I guarantee you would tap no matter who you were. Um, when I was a light green belt, I actually got beat by a black belt girl who was 1 year older than me. I was 16 years old at the time, and she was 17 years old. And she was a black belt, and I was a light green belt, which is halfway to black belt by rank, but probably about 1/10 of the way to black belt by the time required to actually learn everything to get a black belt. But she tapped me out with the reverse figure 4 ankle lock, and I had no choice but to tap out. It hurt like ever loving hell, and I had to tap out. If you don't tap out, you'll get your Achilles tendon torn. So don't tell me this stuff does not work, Ramsey Dewey. Either the fighters in MMA don't know how to do it, or there's something else going on. Either it really is banned, or else they're throwing the fights. Because I absolutely know that the front wrist lock and Nikio wrist lock work on black belts, even regardless of their size or adrenaline, because that's exactly how I used to beat them. I would get the wrist lock on one of them and keep his body between myself and the other one while I kicked his guts out until he tapped out, and then I'd beat the other guy one-on-one. That's exactly what I was doing to them, was wrist locks. And they couldn't even beat me 2-on-1 at it. Don't tell me it doesn't work. I've been on both ends of it. I've absolutely been on both the receiving and the dealing end of both several different types of wrist locks, around 12 different types of wrist locks. I probably knew at one time 20 something types of wrist locks, but I definitely still know at least 6 of them that I can execute right now, even greatly out of practice and even having had 4 strokes, because I'm about 50% numb in my left hand and both feet, but my right hand is still pretty normal. So I can probably still execute the joint locks well enough to defend myself against a normal fighter. Now, could I actually fight a pro fighter right now? No, I'd get my ass kicked because I'm sick. I've had 4 strokes. But I should have gone pro when I was 20 years old because I could have been a contender when I was 20 years old. But, don't tell me that this does not work. I absolutely know that these locks work. All the front wrist lock is you catch them right here across the 4 fingers and you torque back and down at the same time, and they will either tap out or you'll have such a mechanical advantage over their body that you'll be able to knee and kick their guts out, and then they'll have to be stopped on unanswered strikes. The reverse wrist lock bends the elbow upward and the hand backwards against the elbow and then twists inward, and it hurts like hell, and you'll tap out to it pretty much instantly. What we call the full wrist lock, and but by the way, closing your fist doesn't help against this one. All right, because Ramsey Dewey thought closing your fist helped against wrist locks. It doesn't. It doesn't even matter. I used the karate black belts. We actually, one of the main focuses of our punching style is to make sure we're using a correct fist. And we use a vertical fist because it actually strengthens the alignment of your thumb and your wrist against the rest of your body mechanics. And is superior for a no gloves fighting style, which we're training for self defense, right? But in gloves, the punch probably doesn't matter too much with tape and gloves. But if you don't have tape and gloves, a vertical fist is better than a twist punch. Just think about the fact that when you twist your fist, a lot of the energy is wasted in the twisting motion, and then you're going to get a spiral fracture. Believe me, my mother works at the hospital. She's a patient care tech at the hospital, and one of the common injuries that people come in with when they get in a street brawl who are not trained fighters is they have boxers fracture of their metatarsal or whatever these tarsal or metatarsals or whatever they're called up here in or carpal in the hand. You get fractures in the bones in your hand and wrist when you try to throw a horizontal twist punch, especially if you haven't trained it to perfection. You will break your own arm. This punch is better. But anyway, what I'm getting at is it doesn't matter if you know how to make a correct fist or not. If I do the full wrist lock on you, it's going to unclose your fist as just a matter of, because I'm going to grab you right here, put the thumb between the bone of your thumb and your index finger inside your palm and push in and down. And look what happens. I can try to close this fist and I can wrench that fist mostly open just by doing the correct motion there. And then you crank back and down and chicken wing the person. And again, you knee their guts out and they tap out, or the referee stops it due to unanswered strikes. Just because you might not get a tap with the lock by itself, which I can actually get the tap with the lock itself without even using strikes in combination with the lock. But we call that concept combined submission striking. All right. In Ishinru karate, it's a concept that almost never gets mentioned at all in MMA because they don't know it or else they're incompetent. But it's been called combined submission striking ever since the style was invented in the 1960s. And I first heard that term in 1992. All right. Before anybody even knew what the UFC was. And the concept is you get a wrist lock on somebody and then you can apply your own elbows or knees or kicks to their body or their face, for in the case of elbows, at free will. And in response to the gentleman on a certain forum that I'm not going to mention the name of the forum that I visited, but he was talking about that he claimed he knocked out a karate black belt with a one-off hook punch in a fight one time. And I told him either the karate black belt was a paper black belt or you threw a sucker punch at him. I said a hook punch is actually the second easiest punch in the world to block. All right. It's one of the first two things we teach to white belts is how to counter a hook punch. Look, I'm not lying. One of the first two things we teach to white belts is how to counter a hook punch or an overhand haymaker. And the very first thing you're going to do is lock them down with a joint lock when you block the hook punch or overhand haymaker with your basic middle block or high angle block. So, and again, Ramsey Dewey saying that blocks aren't blocks, they're for grappling. They're taught both ways in Isshinryu karate. Every strike can be a block, every block can be a strike, every block can be a grappling maneuver, every strike can be a grappling maneuver, and you can make grappling maneuvers into strikes in some cases. You know, from a clinch, you can throw an elbow from 2 inches away and cut somebody's face up. But but it's taught both ways. It's taught every way in Isshinryu karate. So, you know, he's wrong about that too. Matter of fact, the original purpose of the X block is actually to block one of these, an actual stick swung at your head. It's a lot more sensible to sacrifice your arm to block this thing than it is to get hit in the head and get your skull crushed. But that's actually the real purpose of X blocks is to stop a stick, an Eskrima stick or an Okinawan bow from hitting you in the head and crushing your skull. And yeah, it's probably going to break your own arm. That's why we use a double bone block in Isshinryu karate rather than a single bone block, because you get double the surface area and hopefully you distribute the force and less likely to break your arm. But the point there is that the cross block or the high angle block are used to block weapons and you sacrifice your arm instead of getting your head crushed by a weapons attack. So he doesn't know basic bunkai, even though he knows the word bunkai. He doesn't know basics. But anyway, I'm digressing. The joint locks do work. I've tapped people out with them in real full contact spars. I've tapped out Gracie second degree black belts using karate joint locks. I've tapped out karate black belts and second degree black belts using karate joint locks. And I've tapped out judo brown and black belts using karate joint locks. So, you know, don't say it doesn't work. And I've had it done to me too. I've even had it done to me by a girl, and it does work, and you will tap out if it's done correctly. If it's done incorrectly, you might not tap out. But if it's done 95% correctly, you're going to tap out, and you're not going to have a choice but to tap out.